I was sitting on my back porch this morning, the kind of morning where the Arizona sun is just starting to bake the dust, and I had my old leather work boots sitting between my feet. They're the same pair I've had since I moved out here, sturdy, thick-soled, and reliable. I was holding a tin of saddle soap and a rag, doing what I've done every few months for 40 years, checking the seams, looking for cracks in the leather, and making sure the soles haven't worn down to the point where they'll trip me up on a gravel path. You see, when you've lived as long as I have, you realize that the things that carry you, whether it's a truck, a house foundation, or your own 2 feet, don't just fail all at once. They give you quiet little signals long before the breakdown happens. Most people just don't know how to read the manual. Maybe you've noticed it yourself lately, perhaps while you're pulling on your socks in the morning or getting settled into your recliner at night. You might feel a little something that wasn't there before, or maybe it's the absence of feeling that catches your attention. It's easy to brush it off as just getting older, like a door that squeaks a bit more in the winter. But after 81 years, I've learned that the body doesn't usually repeat itself. It tells you once, and if you don't listen, it just moves on to the next stage of the problem. That's why I wanted to talk to you today. I want to show you how I look at my feet the same way I look at these boots, checking for those 9 specific signs that tell us our internal plumbing, specifically our blood sugar, is starting to cause trouble beneath the surface. Now, back when I was working in community health in Ohio, I spent a lot of time helping folks understand medical jargon. My daughter Laura, who's been a registered nurse for a long time now, always tells me that feet are the early warning system for the whole body. She calls it peripheral neuropathy, which is just a fancy way of saying the wiring in your legs is starting to fray because there's too much sugar in the line. It reminded me of the old manufacturing plant where my father worked. If the electricity wasn't clean, the motors would start to hum in a weird way before they eventually burned out. Our feet are at the very end of the line, the furthest point from the heart, and they're the first place where the rust starts to show. I remember about 3 years ago, I was helping a neighbor of mine, a man named Arthur, who lived just 2 doors down. And Arthur was a few years younger than me, but he walked like a man who was balancing on eggs. One afternoon, we were out near his irrigation valves, and I noticed he was wearing these heavy, thick socks, even though it was nearly 95 degrees out. I asked him about it, and he told me his feet felt cold all the time, but also like he was walking on cotton balls. He laughed it off, saying he guessed his tires were just getting bald. But I could see the way he moved, he wasn't sure where the ground was. That's the first sign I always tell people to look for. That feeling of numbness, or what the doctors call a loss of sensation. It's like the leather on your boots getting so thick and calloused that you can't feel the stones under your feet anymore. If you can't feel the ground, you can't balance, and that's how a small trip becomes a broken hip. While I was rubbing the soap into the creases of my boots this morning, I thought about the second thing Arthur mentioned, that tingling. He described it like a low-grade electrical buzz, or like when your foot falls asleep and starts to wake up, but it never quite finishes the job. In my world, that's static on the line. It's the nerves crying out because the blood flow isn't bringing them the oxygen they need. If you feel that pins and needles sensation, especially when you're resting or trying to sleep at night, that's your body telling you the sugar levels are irritating the nerve endings. It's not just a nuisance, it's a signal that the insulation on your internal wiring is thinning out. I took a break from the boots to get a glass of water, and as I walked across the kitchen tile, I thought about how my son Daniel, who's a physiotherapist up in Denver, always talks about the foundation. He tells his patients that if the foundation of a house settles unevenly, you'll see cracks in the drywall upstairs. In our feet, that shows up as the third sign, swelling. If you look at your ankles at the end of the day and they look like a couple of bags of flour, or if your shoes feel tight in the afternoon even though they fit fine in the morning, that's edema. Yeah, it's fluid sitting in the basement because the pump isn't working right. In diabetes, the blood gets thick, for lack of a better word, and it has a hard time climbing back up the legs. It pools down there, stretching the skin and making everything feel heavy and sluggish. When I sat back down, the light hit my boots at an angle, and I noticed a spot where the leather had turned a strange, dark color because of some old oil. That's the fourth sign to watch for on your own feet, changes in skin color. If you see patches that look reddish, or maybe a bit blue, or even a dark, dusky purple, that's a sign that the pipes are restricted. My father used to say you could tell if a pipe was clogged by how the metal changed color under pressure. If your feet aren't getting fresh red blood, they'll start to look like a bruise that won't go away. It often starts near the toes or the heels, the places that take the most pressure when you walk. I remember Margaret, my wife, used to be so careful about her skin. Toward the end, she'd get these very dry patches on her shins. That leads me to the fifth sign, skin that is unusually dry or cracked. You might think it's just the Arizona air, and believe me, this desert will dry out a cactus if it's not careful. But if your heels are cracking to the point of bleeding, or if the skin on the bottom of your foot feels like parchment paper, it might be because the nerves that control the oil and moisture in your feet aren't getting the right signals anymore. It's like a leather boot that hasn't been oiled in a decade. It gets brittle, and once it cracks, the weather gets inside. In your feet, those cracks are open doors for infection. That brings us to the sixth sign, and this is the one that really worries me because it's so easy to miss. It's the sores or ulcers that just won't heal. I'm talking about a little blister from a shoe or a scratch from a pebble that is still there 2 or 3 weeks later. In a healthy body, the repair crew arrives quickly to fix the damage. But when your blood sugar is high, the repair crew is stuck in traffic. I saw a man at the community center once who had a bandage on his big toe for 3 months. He thought it was just a stubborn corn. It turned out his body simply didn't have the resources to close the wound. If you have a rust spot on your body that won't go away, you need to pay attention before the whole structure is compromised. I shifted my weight on the porch and felt the heat of the stone through my thin socks. That's the seventh sign, a change in the temperature of your feet. Sometimes one foot will feel much colder than the other, which tells you the heater isn't getting enough fuel. That's blood flow. Other times, a patch of skin might feel hot to the touch, which usually means there's an invisible fire, an infection burning underneath. I always tell folks to use the back of their hand to check their feet. If you find a hot spot on your foot that wasn't there yesterday, it's like smelling smoke in the attic. You don't wait to see flames before you call for help. As I was finishing up the second boot, I looked closely at the nails. Even on a boot, the hardware matters. The eighth sign is changes in your toenails. If they're getting very thick, turning yellow, or crumbling at the edges, it's often a fungal infection that's taking advantage of your weakened defenses. High sugar in the blood is like fertilizer for fungus. It makes it easier for these things to take root. I've seen people who can't even clip their own nails anymore because they've become like chunks of old rotten wood. It's not just an old age thing. It's a sign that the body's border patrol is spread too thin. The last sign, the ninth one, is something Daniel pointed out to me when he was visiting last Christmas. He looked at my legs and said, "Dad, you've still got the hair on your toes. That's a good sign." I laughed, but he was serious. Loss of hair on your toes, feet, or lower legs is a classic sign of poor circulation. When the soil doesn't get enough water, the grass stops growing. If your lower legs have become smooth and shiny, and the hair you used to have has disappeared, it's because the follicles have starved. It's a subtle change, one that happens over years, but it's a clear indicator that the flow is restricted. I know this sounds like a lot to keep track of, especially when we've got enough to worry about just getting through the day. But think of it like this. I don't check my boots because I'm afraid of them falling apart. I check them so I can keep walking. It's about maintaining my independence. I want to be able to walk down to the mailbox, and I want to be able to keep up with my 4 grandkids when they come to visit. I saw what happened to my father when he ignored the noises his body was making. He was a proud man, a disciplined man, but he thought that admitting to a problem was a sign of weakness. By the time he finally let a doctor look at his legs, the damage was so deep that he lost a lot of the mobility that defined him. I don't want that for you. You see, after 60, The things that used to be small maintenance issues can become major structural failures if we don't catch them early. The body doesn't ask twice in the same way. It gives you these 9 whispers, the tingling, the coldness, the dry skin, the missing hair, and it expects you to be a good steward of the machinery. If you've noticed any of these things, don't wait until you feel pain to act. With diabetes, sometimes the nerves are so damaged that you won't feel the pain until it's far too late. That's the dangerous part. You have to use your eyes and your hands to do the work that your nerves can't do anymore. I'm 81 now, and I've had my own scares with my circulation and my blood pressure. I've had those mornings where I looked at my feet and wondered if that redness was something to worry about. I didn't have all the answers back then, but I was lucky enough to have Daniel and Laura to point me in the right direction, and I spent a lot of time reading those heavy medical books to translate them into something I could actually use. What I've learned is that the rust can be managed if you catch it while it's still just a spot on the surface. You can change your diet, you can walk a little more, and you can work with a professional to get those sugar levels back where they belong. It's easy to feel like the clock is against us, but I don't look at it that way. I look at it like my old boots. They've got some miles on them, sure. The leather is thinner in some places, and the soles have been replaced once or twice. But with a little soap, a little oil, and a lot of attention, they're still the best pair of boots I've ever owned. Your feet are the same way. They've carried you through decades of work, thousands of miles, and a lifetime of memories. They deserve a few minutes of your time every morning. Take a seat on the edge of your bed tomorrow morning before you put your socks on. Really look at them. Check the heels for cracks. Look between the toes for any redness. Feel the temperature. If something looks different than it did last month, write it down or tell someone who knows what they're looking at. It isn't about being scared, it's about being smart. It's about protecting the foundation so the rest of the house stays standing. I've seen too many good people lose their ability to get around simply because they didn't think a little numbness or a thick toenail was worth mentioning. We've still got a lot of road ahead of us, and I want to make sure you're equipped to walk every bit of it. It's a heavy responsibility, keeping this aging machinery running, but it's a moral duty we owe to ourselves and the people who love us. I'm going to finish up with these boots now and get ready for my morning walk. The sun is up and the air is still clear. I hope you'll take a moment to do your own audit today. It's the small habits, the ones nobody else sees, that keep us independent and present in the lives of our families. I'm glad we could have this talk. It feels good to get these things out in the open, away from the clinical rooms and the scary brochures. Just remember, what you ignore today is what will limit you tomorrow. But you still have time, and you still have the capacity to change the outcome. I'll be here, doing the same thing, trying to stay one step ahead of the rust. I think I'll head inside now, get some shade before the real heat kicks in. You take care of yourself, and I'll talk to you again soon. Goodbye for now.